Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest I'm so excited to interview today's guest because he's all about systems. He loves systems, processes, procedures, checklists, and we're going to have a fun and interesting conversation. Yes, fun and interesting. Processes and procedures, but fun and interesting conversation. So Alexis Kingsbury, hello.
Hello, Adi. It's great to be here. Thanks very much for having me on the podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome. And of course, we need to give a big shout out to Topher Morrison, who introduced us. And
Thank you,
I
Topher.
did a fantastic podcast with Topher. I'm actually going to do another one because he introduced me to so many great people that I have more questions for him. And the podcast that I recorded with Topher was all about we created a process together on how to introduce yourself correctly in a networking situation, right? So he walked me through how to actually engage people in a conversation, which was a great podcast. And I'm going to include the notes to the link to the show in my show notes. So absolutely. Well, Alexis, let me introduce you first. So first of all, you are in the United Kingdom, which is awesome. I love England. And you are an award-winning serial entrepreneur. And you currently own 2 software companies, and we're going to talk about that. And you serve over 600 organizations around the world, including well-known brands such as Sony, 3M, Fitness First, Pepsi. And you're passionate about helping business leaders create freedom to spend time on what matters most. And there is definitely, you walk the walk, right? You don't just talk the talk, because you use your tools. And I know you're passionate about creating more freedom and more time, because that's really, honestly, this is why we document processes and procedures. So we have more time. This is one of the main reasons. But I think all the reasons why we document really lead to more profitability, more time, some kind of a return on investment that is tangible and that can be used. So before we jump into processes and procedures, anything else that you would like to add in terms of your introduction? How did you get started, about your companies? I'm very curious to know, and I'm sure our listeners as well.
Yeah, sure. I can kind of give a little bit of the why. So I suppose it's useful to know that I've always been entrepreneurial at heart. So when I was 11, 12 years old, I was starting businesses and trying to grow them.
By the way, I have to stop you here because I found out in terms of in my podcast that when I interview people, that the most successful entrepreneurs are those that started businesses when they were very young. And they are the ones, yes, I mean, I can name a few of the episodes that I had that is the number one common denominator. I started it also, when I was in high school, I started my first business, and that is a common denominator. So I think it's something to look at.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think, because I think it'd be easy to look at that and say, oh, well, those entrepreneurs have just had a lot of time to build the business and therefore be successful, or to get them via trial and error. And I suspect that there's probably some truth to that, but I think a bigger part of it is it almost speaks to more of the personality that wants to start a business and has got the kind of perseverance, curiosity, kind of mix of feeling happy to just start and then get good later, that I think is often correlated with people who goes into entrepreneurship. That said, there are plenty of people. I think Jeff Bezos is a famous example of people who go into starting businesses much later in their lives, but it normally requires some significant event, practically a trauma in their life, for them to go, yeah, I'm going to leave the comparative or apparent safety of a company, a corporate career, and move into starting a business, particularly because at that point,
it's very true. It happened to me too, because, you know, although I started, you know, I think it's the hard work and the not being, you know, just being solution oriented. Like you want something, you want to get it, you know, you don't get it with your parents, you go get it, right? Or you can see how you can serve others and get exchange. But I agree. I mean, you know, that I didn't start my own business until, I mean, I had small businesses, but my own actual business until there wasn't, if just like what you described, and then you go and do it. And I met a lot of entrepreneurs that did that. So it's not necessarily you start your business when you are like a kid and then you continue, although those are examples as well, but you have it in you and you know that you can rely on yourself to do that.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to say something that I think is surprising, but I'm hoping inspiring, which is that when I started young and tried many, many times to build my businesses, I failed over and over and over again. Now, the reason I hope that's inspiring is because I think there's a temptation to think, well, there is entrepreneurship built into certain people and that they just seem to make it successful and find a way. And I'm proof that that's not necessarily the case. Wanting to be a successful entrepreneur and becoming one are entirely separate. There is no causal relationship there. And so for the multiple businesses that I started while at school, and then when I went to university, I was still starting businesses and I had a placement year working with DHL, still running a business in the background. I only closed my businesses down in my final year because I just couldn't handle all the things happening at the same time. And I thought, I've got to pick. And then after having done that, I was like, you know what? I failed so many times. Maybe I need to go learn how this is done in real businesses rather than learn it from business studies, management science, etc., rather than learn it from books. And so I went and became a management consultant, working with large organizations like AstraZeneca and Honda and BP and so on to help them solve their biggest problems. And particularly the specialism that I developed there was around business processes and ways of working around people. And it was there that I kind of really learned that the big mistake I'd been making was assuming that the business model, the product, was the problem. And actually the reality was that any of the businesses I'd started could have been grown, but every time I would grow it, I'd get busy and then I wouldn't be able to scale it. And I hadn't worked out how to delegate and systemize the bits that were working so that I could continue to grow it. So I left being a consultant for these big companies thinking, brilliant, now I'll go and do it. But there was a nagging thought. And that nagging thought was because my line manager and various other people had told me in my past that I would never be a good people manager. I didn't have the people skills. And so yet again, this was another time of hearing that, you know, firstly, having failed multiple times, I didn't really have the skills to be an entrepreneur. Now I thought, well, maybe I think I know what went wrong, but now I don't have the skills to manage people. And so I tried to manage businesses and build businesses without people in them. And I couldn't get that to work again. And even then, when I tried to build it with people, but I thought I don't want to manage them, I don't want to employ people, I tried to use contractors and it went terribly. And it was only when I finally decided, you know what? I need to get really good at this. I need to get really good at delegation, despite the fact that I don't seem to have the natural talent for it. I need to work out what's the process, what's the system that allows me to delegate effectively, consistently, and grow the business. And it probably took me 3 years from that realization to working out the actual way that works beautifully. And then boom, my software business at that time, SpiderGap, my 360 feedback tool business, then took off. And it scaled, and it got to a point where for at least 2 years now, it's run without me operationally, but also critically, it now runs without me at a leadership level as well. Like my leadership, funnily enough, yesterday my CEO/COO was on holiday, and they needed someone to present the state of the company address of like, here's where we've been, here's where we are, here's where we're going. And I was asked, do you mind doing it? We've prepared all the slides and so on. And so it was really funny and weird for me to be presenting, oh, this is what we've done. This is where we're at. And this is where we're going. And yet the whole time I'm thinking, I haven't done any of these things. I wasn't the one who came up with the list of where we're at, and I wasn't the part of the leadership team that was drafting what we're going to do. My entire role was just coaching the leadership team to just have some conversations and challenge it. And we joke that my role as challenge is basically I say, "Oh, are you sure?" And they tell me really good reasons why they are, and I go, "Okay, yeah, that sounds good." And so that shift was huge, life-changing, both for my business, but also for my personal life, because it's meant that now I get to spend time on the things that I really enjoy, whether it's time with my family. Like last year, I took a 6-week holiday on a road trip with my wife and 2 kids across France and Spain, or whether it's in my work. Like, I really enjoy speaking on podcasts and speaking on stage. And today's a nice example where rather than being stuck in the business, I got invited last week to come and speak at an event at Xero HQ in the UK, the accounting solution Xero, with an event collaboration with Mike Michalowicz, who wrote Clockwork and Profit First and so on. Absolute hero of mine in terms of author. And they had me speak at that event. And then I came off and Mike's like, "Oh, that was amazing. I want to interview you." And I said, "Oh, can I interview you on my podcast, De-Stress Your Business?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely." And I get to do that. And that is mind-blowing to me, because it doesn't feel that long ago that I wouldn't have been able to take a day out of the business for a good opportunity, never mind just because I think it might be there might be some side benefit like that. And so
well, Alexis, I have to stop you because I'm so curious, and so are our listeners. What did you do? Walk us through this. What did you do?
Yeah, so and it's probably helpful context to know that the journey that we went through, that essentially 3-year journey of trying different things, resulted in an approach that we now, through my other software business, AirManual, is a journey that we now share with clients, and we provide a software platform to make it easy and frictionless for people to capture the processes, the employee onboarding checklists, and make it all self-service and make it possible for the teams to do it. And so
first of all, what's the name of the software?
Yeah, so the software is called AirManual, as in your manual, but in the air. And the concept behind it is essentially removing the friction behind documenting, using, maintaining, continuously improving, managing your processes, because that was my experience. And so before I go into like the step-by-step of what I find now works for people, it's useful to understand that documenting and delegating, systemizing your business is not a brand new thing. Like, that, right? It's something that if you go back to like Michael Gerber's E-Myth, and many other books, like you go back to Peter Drucker and so on, business experts have been telling us for decades that you need to document and delegate. You need to get these processes done. And that's what I was doing back when I was a management consultant working with these really large businesses. But here's the problem, because I've experienced it myself, and lots of business owners have had the same experience, is you try to document and delegate, but it takes ages. The team don't follow the processes, or they make mistakes and skip steps. It all becomes a mess and people don't know where to find stuff. And then everything goes out of date anyway. And you end up 1, 2, 3 years later, after this big project that you did around systemizing, back where you started. And my frustration particularly came, I remember on one particular project that I was doing for a really large organization. We'd helped sort out their finance processes. We'd worked out how essentially previously it was taking about 23 people's worth of time, and instead we'd reduced it down to 3 by improving their processes. And so we had these process diagrams written up in A0 size, laminated, stuck on the wall, and we'd done all the training for these finance people to help them run these processes efficiently. And I remember I said, practically walking out the door and just saying to the partner in charge, like, how will they update and improve those processes? They're stuck on the wall, they're laminated, they've been created using a software that no one in the organization has even got on their system, on their computers, never mind knows how to use. And I got this puzzled expression as if to go, well, they'll have to hire us again in 2 to 3 years. And my experience of that in that moment was like a feeling of sickness. Like I didn't like that idea. And I liked it even less when I was then in my own business thinking, I don't have to repeat this every 3 years. So,
and Alexis, I'm so with you on that. I just need to interject here because
sure.
you are speaking, I'm like, wow, it's like me speaking, right? Because we are so aligned on it. Because the reason why I started my current company is because I'm just like you. I was a general business consultant, very successful, but I would go to my clients and I would say, you need to document your processes. You need to document your processes. And yes, and week after week, it didn't happen. It was on their to-do list. Maybe they started, they didn't know how. And I go, well, how about if I do it for you? Wow. And then because I get it done. And that's what I tell our clients, and then obviously it's not just me doing it. I mean, I have a team of people that we work together and we do it. I mean, I have consultants, technical writers, and all the entire team that is dedicated, but it's basically extracting that knowledge, creating the diagrams, but very simple, and documenting it. And I can't emphasize enough. I tell my clients, I'm not going to do any documentation project that is not using a software like yours, because then you can't, because the most important thing for me is that it's being followed by all and utilized and keep it live and keep being used every single time. And it's easy to make changes, because otherwise the investment, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying about feeling sick, because I'm saying this is a big investment. It's investment because, we are there documenting everything. It takes time, it takes resources, but I'm not going to do it if you're not going to use it, because my success is that we're changing the culture of your company by using those processes and procedures. Okay. So I completely agree with you. I just wanted to back up what you're saying, because that is exactly, and your story is so, basically a great example of that. So let's jump, and I want to know, what did you do? So yes, yeah. So AirManual, is it airmanual.com where people can go and visit?
airmanual.co.
Okay, airmanual.co. Go look at it, check it out. You gotta use a software like that. It is not redundant, because people also ask me, is it redundant because I'm using this, I'm using that, or I want to document on my whatever software I'm using in order to run the business? And no. This software is basically like your textbook. Everything is there, and then you can actually do the exercises and you can manage through that. So absolutely needed. Okay, airmanual.co. This is our little sponsorship in the middle. And now let's go over how did you get yourself to extract yourself out of the company and get it to work without you?
Yeah, and so I'll go through the process, but I want to link back to what you just said there around, it's about the cultural shift in the organization. Like this isn't really about the tool. The tool is there to remove the friction and to make it possible that everything can be followed by all, and to make it to enable you to set a realistic expectation of your team that when they're going to do something, that they follow the process and they use it every time, and that if there's a mistake or a question that they have, that they update the process so that that never happens again. And so that is a cultural change that is supported by frictionless, beautiful process management software. So that's what this is all about. So if we talk about the process, how do we actually do this? The first thing, and it sort of relates to a common myth or objection or concern that people have, is people imagine like, oh yes, I need to document the entire business, and they set that as the goal. And the problem is, firstly, that's it's not a very good goal, but also it's not even accurate. Like, okay, great, you want to document every single thing in the business, good. Does that include how to open an email? Does that include how to go to the toilet? Sit down in your chair? It's like, well, obviously not those. Great. So we're agreed that it's not documenting everything in the business. There is a line to be drawn. There is a continuum of value that we have to work on. Therefore, the most critical thing we can do, which is stage one in our approach, is focus. You start off with what is going to add the most value to the business. Now, depending on your situation, it might be that the current leader, the leadership team or business owner is just too busy. They're stuck in the day-to-day. So I had a client who was working 60-hour weeks when we first started working with him, stuck in their day-to-day, couldn't even see how to free up his time. He wanted to go work on a property project. They've got a successful business, but he was so stuck in it, he couldn't even like spend time with his family at the weekend, never mind take on a new project. And we started off by saying, well, what's taking up, if that's your focus, what's taking up most of your time? And we identified a series of tasks, but one in particular was just replying to requests for quotes from customers and giving the quote to them. And that as a starting point, like, I'll go through the steps that we did after that. But as a result of working with him, we instantly, after working with him for an hour and a half, freed up 15 hours per week. That's basically 2 working days per week after working with him in 2 calls of like 45 minutes each. Crazy results to get 15 hours per week. That's 780 hours per year. But you see, the key there when I talk about focus is we started off with what's the biggest problem that he's got. And for him, it was his time. For other business owners, it might be repeated mistakes. It might be that they're fed up with firefighting all the time and having Groundhog Day of, oh, this client's had an issue, or, you know, we've sent the wrong invoice again, or whatever. Like, that's a common one. Another one that we see is over-reliance on key people. So we've got a business owner of a publishing company where when he first started working with us, he was terrified and was having sleepless nights about the idea that his business partner might be unwell or even just frankly go on holiday, because she was the only one that could do several, particularly finance-related tasks, but there are a variety of tasks. She was the only one that could do it. And he didn't even know what would be involved or what the tasks were or have access, never mind like have a checklist to follow. And so the worry was that if she got knocked down by a bus, the entire business with 60 people in it would fall over. And so we used that as the focus to then start. And so and then one of the other common ones, problems that we see on focus is around onboarding new team members. So particularly for high growth businesses, or businesses that have the potential to be high growth, is they get busy. I was talking to a client, someone who started working with, who he was saying like, oh yeah, I need to hire my next person, but I'm going to wait until I get this particular revenue goal. And we said, okay, well, what's holding you back from that revenue goal? Is it like leads? Do you need to do more marketing? He said, oh no, quite the opposite. And he showed us like all these leads coming through. He said, in fact, I've got so many leads, I've had to turn off the marketing because I can't handle them all. And he's like, right. And you're going to wait to hire until you have more sales that you can't get because you can't handle the leads that you've got.
Yeah,
like,
I know, it doesn't make sense.
Exactly. And so that became the focus, right? Is how do we create the onboarding checklist that means you can quickly get new team members that haven't got loads of experience up to speed and being able to handle that so that you can grow the business. And so
and I need to give you a plug in on that, because I just need to back up. I mean, everything that you were saying, well, of course, because we kind of like, we're from the same field, so we feel the same. But, you know, I just onboarded 2 new staff members for my company, right? And 2 more team members. And I was able to use the onboarding checklist and the onboarding process that I have and only spend a few minutes with them, and they are up and running just like that because of the beautiful onboarding system. And I agree with you. You know, another one that I find is consistency, right? Lack of consistency of results that business owners are encountering, and that takes their time as well, because then they have to interfere and they have to train more, or they have to like do it themselves or whatnot, and that can prevent delegation, right? Yeah,
indeed. And for me, it's kind of aligned related to the one I was sharing around mistakes and firefighting. It's just on the other side of that coin, right? Is because you're absolutely right that I was coming at it from the point of view of, oh yeah, mistakes, and you know, it's really painful. But actually, right, like often it's just tweaks that you can improve to your performance that means that you can get amazing results. Like, it's funny, I mentioned that client who was working 60-hour weeks, and we freed him up 15 hours a week by sorting out the quoting process. Hilariously, when we did our impact review with him, I said, you know, I was going through the process, following our checklist, and the question is, what's been the biggest impact? And because I talk too much, I said, so the next question was, what's the biggest impact? Presumably, it's all the time you've saved up so you can be on the golf course. Ha 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 ha. And he said, actually, no. I was like, whoa, what? And he said, and because this was quite early on in the journey with us, he said, no, it's because now that I've handed over the sending quotes to customers, basically a price quote, it previously used to take me 2 to 3 days to do that. My account managers now do it in less than an hour. Imagine the impact on conversion rate. Suddenly you're like, oh my God, you've got potential customers that are reaching out saying, hey, can I get a quote for this project? And previously they weren't getting anything back from him for 3 days. Now they get back an hour. Imagine you've got two companies side by side. One comes back an hour, one takes 3 days. Which one are you going with, right? So as a result, it's like, oh, wow. Like I didn't even think about the top line improvement. As you say, like the consistency or just leveling up your performance so that you can, in his case, like 2x, 3x your revenue for the same amount of leads is crazy. So when you've got that in place, it's powerful. But that's why we start with the focus, because the temptation is to document things that are easy to document or things that are a natural starting point for documentation. But the problem is, it's like, why not start with the biggest impact? And so when you do that, it makes it much easier to get the whole team around it as well.
Absolutely. All right. So tell me, okay, so we have to walk through the process. I mean, we are agreeing that you have to be focused on the why and what is the benefit and really understand what difference it will make. Then how did you delegate? How did you manage to actually extract yourself from your business?
Yeah, so the next step is can be a really, really quick one. And it's a nice example of where it's something that we've made really like user-friendly and quick in our tool, because you'll see as we go into the next steps, once you start moving on this, it flows quite nicely. So the next step is outline. Taking the focus, the problem that you want to solve, outlining what are the activities that need to happen, that need to be documented in order to achieve the result. For example, outlining what are the tasks that the business owner is currently spending all of their time on that means they can't grow the business. Or what are the processes that currently are causing loads of mistakes or that people are inconsistent on, that if they were consistent, we'd solve the problem. Or what are the onboarding checklists and processes that need to exist so that we'll be able to get team members up to speed? Or what are the activities that your key finance person needs to have documented so that they can be done in their absence when they go on holiday or get sick or whatever.
Good. So you outline it, and then what?
Once you've outlined that, then we can move on to what we call prioritize, document, and test, PDT cycle, where we start off by saying, okay, of those, what's the highest priority? And because we don't want to document all of these simultaneously, we say, take one. Okay, we prioritize that one that's causing the most pain, taking up the most time, whatever. Then we go, right, now you're going to document it, but you're going to do it at a high level. And so like one things that we show in AirManual, in fact, we're now embedding AI so that it can kind of help some of this process. Although honestly, the fastest way is often to just brain dump, like at the highest level, what are the steps? What's the trigger?
Right, because you do it best and you know how to do it. So no
exactly.
AI. Actually, sometimes I find that using AI will interfere with it, because all of a sudden you get all these ideas. Oh, this looks really good, but you know what? You're not doing it anyway right now. You don't have time. So leave that. When you have the time, then use the AI.
Yeah. And so when we were looking at embedding AI, one of the key things for us was to go, actually, for that exact reason, because I agree, we want to make sure that the first use of AI is that it queries our template database to say, actually, you're trying to achieve X. Here's the most relevant template that we can pull in, because there are good reasons why we might have developed a template for how to do a sales call, for example, that might be better than your first default. Not necessarily, but it might be. And so you can provide a template. Equally, if you're doing something for the first time, or you're trying to create a process in an area that you feel like you're not strong in, then yeah, it can be better to give you a starting point where you're like, oh yeah, I wouldn't have even thought about following up with my podcast guest after I've done the recording to do X and Y. Oh, that's a really good point. But you're right that generally you should be documenting things that you know what needs to happen. You just need to make sure that it's done consistently and done by other people and whatever. So the key is capturing it really high level. And yes, of course, like in AirManual, but in general documentation, yes, you should include screenshots and sub-steps and
videos
and embed videos and so on where appropriate. But often one things that we see is people overusing those things. And as a result, if you do that, you create documentation checklists that are too slow to use. Videos are one of those things where a lot of people love the idea. In fact, on my podcast recently, I interviewed a business owner who said that I love the fact that I can just jump onto like Loom or whatever, and I can just record a video of me doing a task and hand it over. And that is great, but it has one major or a few major drawbacks. The first is that your first attempt at coming up with the process probably won't necessarily be in the right order. So you might realize later on, oh, actually, now I think about it, there's probably a step that I should have done this earlier in the process. That's really hard in a video, really easy in a checklist where you can drag and drop. Another thing that happens is often you're not thinking about all the different use cases. And so that video covers one case, but then when you start then trying to use it, or someone's trying to learn it, they then ask questions. It's very difficult to then put that into the video at the relevant point without then re-recording it, which takes a lot of time. So you've got the issue of editing. You've also got continuous improvement. How do you, if you identify a better way of doing things, or you need to change your way of doing things, are you going to re-record the video? You're going to edit it. It takes a lot of time. So, and every time I say it takes a lot of time, read, and so it doesn't happen, because it becomes a to-do list item rather than like an AirManual, like couple of clicks, change done, published done, right? And you've cascaded to other things. And then the other thing is using and learning. It's much slower to follow a video and have to scrub back and go, wait, hang on, they've carried on, but I'm now on this. Let me go back. Oh no, I've gone too far. Let me go here. And all of that is much, much slower than just being able to follow a checklist.
You're absolutely right, and I'm with you on that. So there is the way that I like to do it. I mean, obviously we video everything and then we extract the checklist for our clients from the videos, but I will include like a segment like of a minute or 2 minutes but there always is a checklist, because I'm saying, like, let's say you do the checklist and step number 1, 2, 3, and 4 really well, but you just need to understand step number 5. I'm not going to listen to the video over and over again, right? But on the other hand, sometimes you read something and you want to see it, because some people are very visual. It's kind of like, you follow a recipe, as an example, like totally unrelated. I follow a recipe and there is something that they're saying what to do, and I don't quite understand it from the checklist. It's enough for me to watch the YouTube video once, and then I can say, oh, this is how you do it. Okay, good. But then next time I'm going to do the recipe, I don't remember maybe how to do it, but I will read the instructions, not watch the video again, because I can't. It's a waste of time.
Agreed. And as a result, we do encourage like embedding video where appropriate, particularly for soft skill things. Like we'll embed a video, for example, into our training on how to describe our product in an enthusiastic way, or here's a video of a recording between a member of our team and a customer, so that you can get a feel for how it happens, because some of those things don't come across in the checklist. That said, one of the things that you said there was like, what if they don't quite understand what was meant in the checklist? The video can help with that. I might argue that actually, if they don't understand what's said in the checklist, I want them to raise their hand and say, I don't quite understand. And then we'll agree how it needs to be changed so that no one else has that question.
That makes sense, because it does have to be.
To watch a 2-minute video and then they work it out and then it's fine. It's like, I'd prefer to fix the checklist.
Right. No, I agree with you. That's definitely, I mean, when I said it, like not understand is like, it might be like a term or something, like, it's like, let's say they tell you to saute the meat, and I go like, okay, what does it mean saute the meat? And then you see in the video, she's like, oh, that's what you mean,
And that's a perfect example, like the equivalent I gave of a recording of the sales call, because it's more of a skill that you're not necessarily expecting us to then have to spell out in the checklist. So I agree.
And yesterday it's actually happened to me with a client. She was walking me through her accounting procedures, like she's an accountant, and one of the things she uses this spreadsheet that is very complex, right? Not complex for her, it works great, but it's kind of like if you want to explain to somebody new, they can be easily overwhelmed what is going on here. So the checklist basically goes over like how to update it step by step, but the overall explanation, it was like 1.5 minutes, but it walks you through and it orients you about what the checklist is all about, which I found would be easier to just watch the video than to 100%. To start writing, because it's kind of like it gives you the picture and the video. So I'm with you. It's kind of like you can't overuse videos and you cannot replace it by a checklist. You have to really have that ability to, and that's why they have experts like you, in terms of like, okay, what is it? What's the real balance here? Because I find that sometimes it's better, like, if there is a business owner and they're totally busy and they cannot, busy, it's meaning, for me, busy meaning that you put your attention on what's important to you, but on other things that are not, and then you say you're too busy to do that, right?
Yeah, indeed.
So I find that, okay, you know what, if you want to start delegate somewhere, I tell them, okay, if you cannot write a checklist, just at least record a video and give it to somebody that can definitely write a checklist from it. And then at least start there. But I agree with you that it's too much. You can't replace one with another. You need to know where the balance is.
100%.
Right, Alexis, so you document. Now what happens? We need to get through. We're almost at the end of the podcast, but we need to get through because everybody wants to know how you did it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this stage, we're in prioritize, document, and test, PDT. So we've prioritized, we've documented it. And to your point, it's about that balance. How do you get that balance right? I would advocate err on the side of less. And the reason for that is because then we can move on to the test. So PDT, test. And by test, I mean, get someone else, ideally the person that's going to be doing the task going forward. But if you haven't recruited them yet, then get someone else. Get them to follow the checklist, doing it themselves, not you doing it and them watching. That's not testing it. Get them to follow it, literally checking it off as they go along and doing the thing with you watching, so that you can go, whoa, why haven't you done this? Or you're about to hit the wrong button or whatever, and use those opportunities to immediately change the checklist to fix the problem. So if they say, if you're like going, oh, you haven't applied the right VAT, it should be 20%. And they go, oh, sorry, I don't understand why, because I thought of this. And then you can go, okay, yeah, I get why you thought that. Okay, let's put in the guidance that explains because of these circumstances, it's this rather than this. Okay, great. And then you can carry on. It means that they're taking ownership of the checklist in real time.
Right.
And you're testing it to make sure it's got enough guidance. And if you're then finding they have questions, they're making mistakes, then you can add more information, or you can add in your recording or whatever. But often your aim is to get to a point where you go, you know what, you've done a really good job, and any improvements, etc., we can make over time. And they're owning those, so that when they later say, oh, by the way, Alexis, I thought actually, you know what would be really good is if we ask this question to the customer a little bit earlier in the process. I was thinking about here. And I go, you know what? Brilliant idea. Yes, please update the process. And that's it. And I'm not touching it, and I'm not owning it, and they're able to. And that's why, going back to that cultural point, you want to create a culture in your organization of people who are using the checklist to get the job done, coming up with ways to improve it. Or if a mistake gets made, you attack the process, not the person. And then they own making the updates, and you're essentially still managing the outcome rather than managing the nuts and bolts of the process. So that's where we get to a prioritize, document, test. And the final stage, so we've done focus, outline, PDT. The last one is manage. Is you need to make sure that what is created continues to get used and kept up to date. Now, I've talked about how to make sure that individual tasks are used and kept up to date, but there's a really powerful way in which you can make sure that things don't go out of date and atrophy just naturally. And it all comes down to essentially having a process dashboard where you can see for any given team, what are the activities that need to happen? How frequently do they need to happen? Who owns them? When were they last done? So, and anything that hasn't, like, oh, we haven't submitted our statutory accounts and it's overdue, that needs to show up red so that the people in that team can go, oh, yes, don't worry, I'll get on that. And then you need a meeting rhythm, normally weekly or fortnightly, where as one tiny 5-minute agenda point as part of that meeting review, including reviewing KPIs and progress against objectives, review the process dashboard just to identify, is there anything that's red that we need to deal with? Now, we used to do that in Google Sheets, as you might expect. That's now built into AirManual, so it's automatically populated. So if you imagine now for a given function like finance, you'd have listed out, because we did the outline, all your finance processes. The ones that were high priority to document, you've now got detailed checklists to follow. And we've got clarity on when they next need to happen, who's responsible for them. And in a 5-minute section of your fortnightly finance team review, your team, rather than the top leadership, are able to go, oh, I need to be on that, or I need to address that, or I'm blocked on this. And suddenly you've now got a process that you can repeat now on any area of the business that's causing the next biggest problem. That means that you, as a business leader, as a business owner, are able to step up from the day-to-day and instead manage the impact and delivering more value and supporting the team. And the team are empowered to grow the business, to make sure that things are done consistently, to deliver incredible impact and continue improving things.
And be more profitable, because they have the ability to do that because you're freeing up resources and you're eliminating inefficiencies.
Absolutely. Love that.
Alexis, amazing podcast. This is like, I'm sure we added a lot of value to our listeners, and it just emphasizes the importance of having systems, the importance of using a software documentation, a software to document your processes and use it, not just document, but actually bring them to life and manage them. So it's really a process management software. So I love that. And I love that you do that. I encourage our listeners to go to airmanual.co. And where else, if they want to get a hold of you or ask you questions, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I'd highly recommend for we've actually got a free guide that kind of goes through that process and in more detail to show you exactly what it looks like and brings it to life and provides templates. You can get that guide for free at airmanual.link/discover. That's airmanual.link/discover. If you want to arrange a call with the team, you can do so by changing that from discover to discovery to have a discovery call with the team. I'd love for people to reach out and connect with me. I'm on all the social media ones you'd expect. I'm mainly active on LinkedIn and Instagram, Alexis Kingsbury. Do reach out with any questions. We've also got the podcast, De-Stress Your Business, which I'd welcome people to join. In fact, Adi, I'd love to have you as a guest on it at some point.
Well, I would love that. De-Stress Your Business. Yes.
Exactly. So do check that out. We've also got some great resources at the website at airmanual.co, hit resources, and we've got loads of great stuff, ebooks and recordings of masterclasses we've done and so on. Because back to your point, it's not just about the tool, it is about the cultural change. And if I can share like one quick example from a client that worked with us, before he worked with us, he said that it felt like in the business, people were just working for the paycheck. And when he started working with us, he knew he was going to free up time. He thought, we'd be able to help him with that. He knew that we'd help them sort out the documentation, the systemization, even the onboarding. What he didn't realize is how the culture would change so it became a great place to work. And he said, and you can feel it's different. People love working there now. They feel engaged, empowered, supported, because the processes deliver the values that he has in the organization. They're not just processes to get stuff done. They're processes that fundamentally allow them to live their values in everything they do. And I absolutely love that. Amazing.
Thank you so much, Alexis, for being a guest on this podcast. I really appreciate it.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.